Welcome back to LV Scary Stories. Today, we're diving into the eerie tales from St. Paul, Minnesota. Known for its rich history and vibrant community, St. Paul holds more than meets the eye, places where the past lingers and ghostly apparitions walk among the living. Join me as we uncover 3 chilling stories: a haunting in an old family home, a strange encounter in a quiet room, and a shadowy presence in a grocery store. Each tale leaves us wondering what might be lurking in the corners of this city. So, turn down the lights and get ready for a journey into the supernatural side of St. Paul. Story number 1. In 2006, my 3 friends and I traveled to St. Paul for the cultural New Year celebration. When we arrived, my uncle picked us up, and we planned to stay at a hotel. But as per our tradition, we couldn't refuse his invitation to stay with him. Plus, he had roasted ducks and some drinks ready for us, so we ended up celebrating with him at his house, and by the end of the night, we were all pretty out of it. We slept in the second living room where there was a fireplace. My uncle's house is older, and the room with the fireplace only has 2 small windows and no door to the outside. The room itself was pretty dim. All 4 of us slept there that night, with my friend Chung sleeping next to me. After my uncle and his family went to bed, they left a hallway light on, so the house wasn't entirely dark. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a strange floral smell. I could barely open my eyes and my body felt paralyzed. I was facing the doorway that led to the dining room when I saw a girl with long hair peeking at us from behind the door. Her face looked like it had dry white paint on it, cracking as she smiled. When she smiled, small flakes of the paint fell to the floor. Slowly she emerged from behind the door and walked toward us. Her long hair seemed to fall to the floor like a wig slipping off, revealing that she was bald. Before I knew it, she was sitting on my chest. I couldn't move or breathe. I tried to fight it, but eventually I just gave up and lay there, frozen. The next morning, I woke up feeling drained. On our way to the New Year celebration, I asked Chung if he'd felt anyone sitting on him the night before, but he said he hadn't. I told my friends what I had experienced, and Chung laughed, saying he'd had a dream about meeting a beautiful girl in Australia. He's never even been to Australia, but for some reason, he said he was there in his dream. 3 years later, in 2009, a relative of ours passed away in St. Paul, and my brother and I attended the funeral. In our culture, funerals last 3 days, so after the second day, we went back to my uncle's house to stay the night. My brother and I slept in the same room with the fireplace. That night, around 2 a.m., I woke up to the same floral smell, and my body went numb. My eyes were heavy, but I could still look toward the door. I thought to myself, what if that same figure appears again? Sure enough, I started to see hair and a face slowly emerging from behind the door, smiling at me. She began walking toward us, her hair falling to the floor again, revealing her bald head. She came and sat on my chest, and once again, I couldn't move. I don't know how long she sat there, but it felt endless. Finally, I heard my uncle's kids running around and playing in the other room. Morning had come. Later that day, we returned to the funeral, and I asked my uncle about his house. Without mentioning my sleep paralysis experiences, I asked him if he knew anything about the previous owners. My uncle said he bought the house from a middle-aged couple who had a teenage daughter battling cancer. After she died, they sold the house and moved back to Australia, where they were originally from. Hearing this sent chills through me. Since then, whenever we visit St. Paul, I avoid staying at my uncle's house. Later, when my uncle's son became a teenager, he began experiencing sleep paralysis in their house too. When it gets really bad, he chose to sleep over at his friend's house. That kept happening to him until he went to college and moved out of his parents' house. Story number 2. In 1998 in St. Paul, Minnesota, I had a sister-in-law who had been sick for a while. At the time, many people in our community were not well educated, and we didn't fully understand what was happening. My sister-in-law had severe chest pain and swollen breasts. She was taken to the hospital, but the family refused a biopsy to investigate the issue further. Our unfamiliarity with Western medicine and hospital procedures led us to decline the biopsy, opting instead to go home and pursue traditional religious treatments. The doctor sent my sister-in-law home with pain medication, and she passed away shortly after. If I remembered it correctly, my sister-in-law's health problems started after she gave birth to her daughter, Mimi. Her breasts were swollen as expected, but even after feeding Mimi, they stayed swollen, painful, and didn't go down. We didn't fully understand what had happened to my sister-in-law. After she passed, my brother stayed home for 8 months, using some life insurance money to get by before eventually returning to work. By that time, Mimi was around 1 year old and could walk. My brother had 2 daughters. The other was my 4-year-old niece, Kia. Sometimes my brother would drop off my nieces before heading to work, and other times I'd volunteer to babysit at his place. When Kia stayed with us, she would often mention her little brother, Stephen. Thinking Stephen was just an imaginary friend, I played along, but Kia would always say that Stephen was at home with her mother. Sometimes, talking to her about it gave me chills. I'd gone to my brother's house many times to watch the girls, and had never seen anything strange, until one snowy day. I offered to go over so he wouldn't have to bring the kids out in the bad weather. That day, I fed, bathed, and put the girls to bed around 8 p.m. Their room was close to the dining room, and I settled in to watch TV in the living room. As it was snowy and dark outside, I figured I'd probably spend the night. Around 9:45 p.m., I heard a door open and thought it might be Kia. I glanced toward their room, but the door was still shut. Then, I saw my sister-in-law standing at the far end of the hallway, holding a naked baby with a strangely large head, next to the last bedroom. The door to that room was open, even though I'd closed it earlier. When I looked at her, she appears to be sobbing softly as she breastfed the baby. Terrified, I got up, kept my head down, and quickly went into my niece's room. I locked the door and stayed in bed with them. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard my brother come home, but I stayed in the room, too afraid to go out. I barely slept that night. The next day, I asked my brother if he'd found the last bedroom door locked when he came home. He confirmed it was. Since it was Saturday, I suggested we go to my mother's for noodle soup, perfect for a cold day. We drove separately so my brother could return home afterward. When we got there, I told them what I'd seen, including that my sister-in-law had another baby. Maybe that baby was Stephen. My mother was alarmed and urged my brother to consult a spiritual healer. My brother explained that when they first viewed the house with their realtor, the door hadn't been locked, and they found a bloody trash bag in the bathroom. Police suspected someone had either aborted or had a stillbirth and left the fetus in that bag. Despite this, my brother and his wife decided to buy the house. After that day at my mother's house, my brother sought out a spiritual healer. According to the spiritual healer, there was an unborn baby's spirit in the house who had been seeking his mother. He was cold and hungry, and had taken my sister-in-law to be his mother, which was why she became sick and died. The healer explained that my sister-in-law had appeared to me because she needed help to free herself from this spirit and move on. My brother scheduled another session with the healer to perform a soul separation ritual. It's a ritual to detach the baby spirit from his wife. During this ritual, the healer detached the spirit from my sister-in-law, lured it into a box, and later left the box in a wooded area. Sometimes after the ritual, I playfully asked Kia about Stephen again, but she said she didn't know where he went and hadn't seen him since. I'm not a religious person, and I can't say for sure if these things are real. Maybe my sister-in-law died of breast cancer, or maybe it was a spiritual cause. Either way, things like this always freak me out. Thank you for listening. Story number 3. This story takes place not in a house but in a grocery store in St. Paul, Minnesota. Sorry, I cannot mention the name of that store here since they're still in business. All I can say is that it's an Asian grocery store. I'd heard that a long time ago, the store had belonged to an American family, but I wasn't sure. About 10 years ago, I was hired there, and my job was to stock shelves. Being new and shy, I didn't have any friends yet. There were some guys and girls working there who would often chat with each other, but I kept to myself, waiting for them to talk to me first, since I'm not great at starting conversations. One time, I went downstairs to grab some supplies. For those who have been to the store, you might remember the yellow bathroom down there. It always felt a little creepy because the lighting was dim. When I got down there, I noticed a middle-aged white woman in high heels standing by the bathroom door, as if she were waiting for someone inside to finish, so she could go in. I went to the back to move some boxes around, and after about 5 minutes, I heard her high heels click-clacking as she walked toward me. But when the sound stopped, and I turned around to see if she needed help, no one was there. I didn't think too much of it at the time, but I had this eerie feeling, as if someone was watching me, and the air suddenly felt cold. I grabbed what I needed and quickly headed back upstairs. After I'd been there a while, the guys started sharing stories about how the place was haunted and warned me not to go downstairs alone. People started pairing up whenever they had to go down there. Eventually, I became friends with an older guy. We'll call him Chung. One day, Chung asked me to go downstairs with him to grab something and help him move some boxes in the back. I was helping an older customer carry some items to her car, so I told him I'd join him in a minute. Once I helped the customer to her car, I went back inside and saw Chung heading downstairs alone, so I followed him. I went to the back where the boxes were and began moving them, but strangely, Chung wasn't there, even though I was certain I'd seen him go down. As I moved the boxes, I noticed small gaps between them and saw a face on the other side. I thought it was Chung. I asked him how many boxes he needed me to move, and I saw him shift to the side. After stacking a few boxes, I went around to where I'd seen him, but he was gone. I looked around and called out for him, but there was no answer. Panic started to set in, so I ran back upstairs. When I got there, Chung was at the front talking to the cashier. He turned to me and asked, "Are you ready?" My face must have looked pale because he immediately asked if I was okay. I told him what had happened, and we decided to go back downstairs together to check things out. There was no one else down there but us. I ended up working there for 8 months before I quit. Working there wasn't too bad, but that place always felt eerie. I'm sure many others who work there have their own stories to tell. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.